chair approval of minutes. Can I have a motion to approve minutes?
I can make a motion to approve the minutes.
Sorry about, let me read this. I had to get that up. It was going slow. Move approval of the October 14, 2020 school board meeting minutes as presented.
So moved.
I have a second.
Second.
Was there any discussion on it? All right, hearing none. Roll call vote. Susan Manning,
Aye.
Susan Fox,
Aye.
Lorraine,
Aye.
Elizabeth,
Aye.
Peter,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
Andrew, aye. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Next, possible action items. The first is the policy revisions, second reading. Can I have a motion to move to approval of the revised policies 2266, 1513, and 5330 as presented?
I would make that motion, except it's 2266, 5113, and 5330 as presented.
Second.
All right. Any discussion on any of those? Seeing none, roll call vote. Susan Manning,
Aye.
Susan Fox,
Aye.
Lorraine,
Aye.
Peter,
Aye. Sorry.
Elizabeth,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
Andrew, aye. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Next item, the 2020-2021 reopening plan. Susan Fox.
I'd like to move to amend the previous action approved at the October 14 board meeting related to offering grades K4K2 a virtual in-person option by deleting the word reopen and placing it with attend, and by deleting December 1st and replacing it with January 25, 2021. And this isn't part of the motion, but the amended motion would actually read then to offer families an option for 4K2 to remain virtual or attend in person in accordance with the PHMDC requirements on January 25th, 2021.
I have a second.
Second.
Discussion.
Well, my reasons for doing that are several. Yeah,
We're not going to get to hear her reasons.
Oh,
December 1st, because I think,
Susan, you cut out. Start over again.
okay, sorry. Yeah, my internet's been bad, so that might happen. And I can't always tell because anyway, so just tell me. You know, I think I might have originally put December 1st out there because originally we'd been talking about December 9.
November 9.
November 9, and the 30th is the Monday, is a professional development day. So December 1st is a Tuesday. But upon rethinking about it after the meeting and some of the input we've gotten, but just rethinking it myself, and I had thought about it, Lorraine made this comment, and I also regretted that we didn't have more discussion about it at the time. I thought we should have. It comes right after the Thanksgiving vacation when health experts all nationally are warning us about family gatherings. I know personally people who are having family gatherings. I'm sure a lot of people are. And so that's a concern. I think that if there's more time provided as well, just to, yeah, I think the other thing that happens then is when they return from that holiday, they're only in school for a couple weeks, about 2.5 weeks to 3 weeks, depending on, I know we're gonna need time for teachers to set up their classrooms, for example. So if there's time taken up, it's more like 2.5 than 3 weeks before another holiday, which is the winter break, where there's more extended family communications. Students return from the winter break on January 4, which is a mere 2 weeks before Martin Luther King Day on the 18th, where there's no school. And then there's 3 days of school, followed by that Friday, there's a professional development day. So by starting on January 25th, it gives a full almost 3 weeks after the Christmas break for a long incubation period if we're concerned about people developing COVID from traveling or relatives, extended family gatherings during that period. It also aligns with the second semester, which is not pertinent to elementary really, but if by some miracle, it seems, if we could maybe be phasing in some older kids by then too, that would make more sense, because for middle and high school, that does make a difference. Those are, I guess, my main thoughts. The more I thought about it, when I looked at the school calendar after that meeting was over and compared it with my regular calendar, which is all I was looking at before, to me, it just makes sense to put it off and be safer about it. The other thing is that, we've all seen the emails from a lot of parents where a very major concern with this whole thing from people, both people who want to remain virtual and people who want to remain hybrid, very much concern about having to switch teachers. And it's very clear that in this model, even if it's 50-50, for example, 50% of the kids are going to have to be with different teachers, 50% of the teachers are going to have to be with different kids. And that's coming from teachers and students, by the way, that concern. So to me, allowing that extra time, the other thing it does is, because we're kind of entering a holiday season now, but post that, it allows for some really serious intentional planning for a transition where, we'd have more time to get a family commitment about what choice they're making, because we won't really know how many teachers we need till we know how many students are going to make that choice, and then who we can switch. And so if there are going to be new class reassignments, it gives more time for those teachers to intentionally plan some activities together, whether, and I assume that would be on Zoom, but kids could get to know those teachers. Now, I realize that some kids are already seeing different teachers because teachers are sharing some asynchronous things. But it's a little different than saying, this is Joan, she's going to be your new teacher, whatever. So you could, I think, plan something. And part of my thinking about that goes way back to when we had to close Maywood School. In the first year we were talking about it, there was a lot of community upset, very emotional, because it had a long history in the district. And we ended up not deciding to do it that year. And over the intervening year, there was a lot of careful planning that went on to bring the Maywood kids to Winnequa and teach, kids going back and forth, getting to know the teachers, getting to know the buildings. And it really eased the transition so that when we finally closed it the year later, there was a lot of sadness, but there wasn't the frustration and anger and lack of understanding. And people got it by then and they felt more comfortable. And of course, since then, and now it's like whole new kids are in there, but it's not, it became a non-issue relatively quickly. And I think it was because it was carefully planned. And I think that we have to carefully plan this transition as well.
Thank you, Susan Fox. Susan Manning?
I just, sorry. Yeah, I'll go on forever. Shut me up.
Okay, Susan Manning?
I support that thought as well. I really strongly support offering parents a choice who can then evaluate how their children are doing in virtual with their teachers. And I know that quite a few parents have been doing parent-teacher conferences in the last few days and have had these discussions. I agree. However, I agree with the rationale, and that is, I think we need time to make sure this is going to be safe and that this will work for our students. And I think this will also give us an option to work through this surge and reevaluate how things are going for all of us. So I appreciate the thought and the support for offering parents an option, but finding a date that's more accommodating.
Thank you, Susan. I'm going around on here to each one board member. So Eric?
I guess my thoughts on, I understand where the reasoning behind moving the date if it relates to staffing and planning. I'm a little hesitant if we're moving it because of the holiday, because I just think that's just such an unknown right now. I mean, yeah, we can say we think that the cases are going to increase, but we don't know that. We don't know how serious families are going to be treating Thanksgiving. I know my family's talking about it right now, what we're going to do as a plan. We're going to all be real cautious. I would like to think that our community is going to be cautious too. So I'm a little hesitant to move it because of the reasoning of where the date falls, because I think we have to really, move forward with the plan. But I am curious to hear, and maybe we can come to you, Dan, and maybe some of the principals after the board members get a chance to speak. I am curious about the logistics of the December 1st start date and how that is looking right now as you're putting the plan together. So I'm going to wait for comments after the board member speaks for that. But if you can just, remember that question of mine, I'd appreciate maybe some feedback on that.
Okay. Lorraine?
So most of the points that I was going to bring up, Susan Fox had already addressed. So some additional things that I wanted to bring up is that, I'm a former educator. I know Susan Fox and Eric are also educators. Typically, when you have students to come back, that first couple weeks is a learning period, right? You're working on rules and protocols, and there's not a lot of learning going on. It's more of getting to know you. And now with this age group, the 4K level through second grade, this is an age group that needs a lot of repeated directions. And now we're adding protocols for safety measures. So that's going to be repeated constantly for 2 weeks. So there's not a lot of learning. And then they'll be going away for Christmas break. So all of that learning is going away, and it has to be retaught again. So for academically, it's not the best thing to do. I would think January would be better. Also, last board meeting, we had our principals to speak and share how things were going with the virtual learning. And most of them, actually all of them, indicated that although it's not ideal, we would prefer in-person learning, it's working, and it's a work in progress. So it's not terrible. So we can work with this until things get better. Also, we requested a survey from our staff members, and 66% of our staff members indicated that they didn't feel comfortable. I think we need to listen to their concerns, and I think it's valid, especially how our state right now is going in the regards to COVID. I personally am experiencing it myself. My dad contracted it this weekend, and I would never want anyone to feel what I feel. Also, we have to think about quarantine. If teachers are having to quarantine, then that means we'll need substitute teachers. And where will we get those substitute teachers from? And then lastly, if we're asking staff to come in person, then I think as a board, we should be doing as also the same thing. We shouldn't be doing this virtual if we're asking others to do that. So those are the points that I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine. Elizabeth?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew, and apologies in advance for the quality of my voice. I have inconvenient laryngitis. I'm sorry, Lorraine, to hear about your dad. That's awful. I actually don't disagree with what anyone has said, and I'm not opposed to pushing back or changing a particular date. I think what I care about are a couple of things. One, that we're really planful about what that is. And so I think even thinking about it from the perspective of like, this is the end of the semester, so that seems logical. This is a quarter, so that seems logical. Like, I think even playing with calendar that way can be a little bit problematic. I think Lorraine's point around what it takes to really like set up and transition kids and teach them skills and abilities is really important. So if we can think about like, just like raw numbers, like there's a 2-week buffer from the time that we have kids that are in the building to the time where we're acclimated enough to learning procedures and protocols. And that is lost instructional time that now in an in-person setting, right, in the virtual setting, the instruction can continue, but an in-person time, that's lost instructional time. And I think we should play around with that buffer, because if we're thinking about end of January and then you add, let's say 2 weeks on top of that, then really instruction starts mid-February, right? And so all of a sudden you start to get pushed back in a way. So again, I'm not opposed to pushing back the date. I think the reasons that are stated make sense. I agree around assumptions around the holidays. I think probability is high there. And I mean, we can play probabilities for a really long time and come out with vastly different conclusions with vastly different data. But this idea of sort of stop and start, I think is problematic, particularly for our youngest learners. And it gives us the probability that potentially we could bring some older kids back too, if by some miracle we get lucky in numbers. So again, not opposed to it, but I agree with Eric that I'd be curious to hear from the principal perspective, kind of what you're thinking, and Dan as well, in terms of, instructional best practices, knowing that our kids are going to have to reacclimate, right, to a vastly different learning environment that they've ever experienced, that our kindergartners have never experienced, right, not having walked in the walls before. So that's kind of that aspect of it. And then I agree wholeheartedly with kind of listening to our community and listening to our teachers and making sure that we're honoring their voice. And I still want us, even if we decide tonight, you know what, January, February, like whatever the date is, to me, we still have to be really, really, really planful, right? And we still need to move forward in what the plan is going to look like, right? And have that very clearly laid out and spelled out and iterated upon, because I think part of the challenge that we've been facing as a community is sort of like this future date, right? With some planning, I know that that's been happening, but like with a gap in communication around what that is and what that looks like. So to me, I am satisfied so long as we are committed to a thing, like I think I said last week, committed to a thing, and then very, very planful and open and transparent about what that looks like and what our pathway and steps are to getting there.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Peter.
Who else is an educator around here? Dan and the administrators who put together this plan, and the board. And as though we do have some experience with educators on this board, when it comes to these big educational decisions and planning what the staff can deliver, what they need to do, I believe and I do trust their judgment in telling us what is the right thing to do. So I'm not gonna, if they tell us that they can successfully, and they suggested the December 1st date, deliver on that date, then I accept that at face value, because I trust the professionals in the district when it comes to that, particularly when it comes to these kind of educational decisions, because they're in the place to speak to what the teachers can deliver and what our needs are. I do regret last week that we phased this as reopening, because it isn't reopening. It is changing to face-to-face model. So I don't have any issue with that whatsoever. Afterwards, yes, we're not reopening. We're just changing our model. I think that there are a couple of reasons to plan to continue what we're planning for. First of all, we talked about older children. I think it would be better if we start with 4K2 and phase in older children. So if we are in a place where we can do 4K2, then I think we should start that before we, because it will be easier to do that than it will be to try and start everything all at once, because everything is new. We're going to have to learn some new and practice and deal with some new protocols. If we put this off to January 22nd, yeah, there's going to be 2 weeks. There's going to be a transition period. Should we have that transition period in December, or transition period in just January? It's not a matter of choosing if we have a transition period. It's a matter of when we have the transition period. So the same thing will be lost. I do think we as a district need to plan to move forward, to find a way to do the best, provide the best education for our kids. And we need to do that safely. And right now we have a recommendation that 4K2 is safe. That might change. If that changes, that would be the time to reevaluate this decision that we made last week. I would, there was a spike, but the spike, the numbers have been going down, and actually fairly dramatically for the last 7 days. Obviously, you have to wait, see how that plays out in Dane County. But if you look at the dashboard today, you'll see that the numbers have decreased dramatically over the last week after that spike. I don't know where they'll be December 1st, but I think if we're going to make that decision based on what the conditions are related to the pandemic, we should wait until, say, the middle of November, sometime when we have a little bit better picture of what's going on. It is useful to note that Dane County has diverged from most of the rest of Wisconsin, because Dane County is one of the few places where we have much stricter restrictions than the rest of the state. And we are in fact seeing, our spike was not as high, and while it's still going up in other parts of the state, Dane County seems to be relatively stable. Of course, time will tell, and we need more time to evaluate that. I'm open to changing this decision, re-examining this decision when we're a little closer to the date, because safety has to be a priority. But at this point, we have recommendations from PHMDC that we can, or PHDMC, whichever it is, that we can reopen. And I think we should stick with our decision at this point and plan to reopen. The plan to go back to in-person school, to offer the in-person schooling option for 4K2. I understand that's a challenge. I understand that it's distressing. I also understand that the reason that Dane County is continuing to keep the recommendation for 4K2 is that no one is seeing that as a source of community spread. It's not, it is apparently, as far as we can tell, not creating a dangerous environment. And so giving people the option, because to be honest, I think for most people, the virtual learning is going fine. For most students, the virtual learning is fine. But I believe that there are some, we know that there are some for which this is a significant challenge for parents, and it is also a loss, an educational loss for kids. And I think that if we can do better, we should do better. And so we should plan to go ahead. We might not get there, but I think it is important that we try and that we plan to move forward with the phase in when things are safe. So I support keeping the December 1st date. I also want to say just one thing, which is I thought, according to the agenda, we were going to review the PHMDC data and staffing considerations and the 4K2 hybrid instruction model. And here we are discussing, just revisiting our decision of last week. So I hope we can move on to those other items that are on the agenda.
All right, thanks, board members. I'm gonna go ahead and give the floor to Dan and the principals if need be. No, I want to go to Dan,
Okay.
and then the rest, and then because Eric had asked the question. So Dan and then the principals, if they'd like to chime in, and then we'll come right back.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I'll start with the protocols about what happens here as far as a timeline, between now and I think it was appropriately mentioned, it's not so much a reopening, but a change in offering the choice. So if we were to stay with the December 1st date, we are set to go, that we have our survey ready to contact parents give them an opportunity to choose the model. That would go out by the end of this week, either tomorrow or Friday. And then we would need the parents to be able to respond to us by November 1st. So it'd be a fairly short window. The reason we need those responses by then is because not only to determine our staffing and how many sections we need, but probably the bigger issue as far as the timeliness is the busing, the transportation. So determining which families would need transportation, and then working from there. And in order to do those transportation routes, we also have to do some sorting to determine which days the students are attending, whether it be the on the alternate days for the busing. So anyway, we have the timeline laid out. We would be ready to go on December 1st, but obviously between now and then, everything just keeps moving. And so parent choice, teacher assignments, transportation, and then getting classrooms ready. Those are the key things that would happen between now and December 1st. If you chose to move it to the January date, those same things would happen. Of course, it would give a little bit more time for each of those phases. I would say that we wouldn't wait till the last minute. We would absolutely want to have everything so parents knew before the winter break by the end of December, here is, everything is all set up. And then when we come back in January, I think it'd be a matter of that point of we're ready to go, unless, again, the case numbers and so on, said otherwise, that we had, that concern to deal with. So I think the only other thing I will add as far as the process and with the staffing, like I said, we have the timeline, we can be ready to go. As far as working with our staff and acclimating and so on, do I think it would be better for our, to have some extra time? Of course, it would be allowed for more, conversations, dialogue, and not have to be, quite so rushed. But that would be, again, kind of the protocol piece. So with regard to the instructional value and what was mentioned with transitions and, developing relationships and so on, I would defer to our principals to be able to speak to that a little bit. And anything else that perhaps that I mentioned that you would like to clarify as well.
Elizabeth?
I just have a quick question for you, Dan. So I think one of the challenges that we're experiencing and hearing about is this idea of teacher transition, which makes a lot of sense to me. Knowing that you can't actually do a one-to-one match, right? Because you have to get hard and fast data. Given the survey that you sent out to parents and the information you have from staff, is there a way to even gauge probability around what types of shuffling would be happening, sort of how many kids we're talking about, or a way to even give parents a sense of your kid has a 70% probability of needing a new teacher, yours has a 30% chance, or whatever else, just to sort of give people some frame of reference for if we go this route and they have to choose.
Sure. Yeah, and actually based on our survey data, I would say that number is 50%, that it was very close to the parents that indicated they would prefer the in-person hybrid model to staying with virtual. And so, for example, I'll use, second grade at Cottage Grove as an example, 8 sections. Okay, so we would anticipate likely 4 sections of in-person, 4 virtual. Now, will those numbers come out exactly right? Probably not. In fact, I think when we looked at the data specifically for that grade level in that school, it was more like 40-60. And of course, the other grade levels might be a little bit different. And so, so there will be some work to do to even out those sections. But that's what we'd be looking at. And if it would be approximately 50-50, that would be the approximate number of students that would be reassigned to a new teacher.
Great, thank you, Dan.
Eric?
I think most of my question was answered, but Dan, I just wanted to clarify. You said that the district is ready to go December 1st, correct? That we would be ready, provided with the survey, the response to transportation issues, correct?
We would make that work, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Susan Manny, did you have something?
Actually, I wanted to add information. So I think it's really critical that when we get the Dane County COVID data, that's provided by Dan as he sees that, rather than one particular board member. The other thing that I think is really important that this board understand is that the hospitalizations have increased dramatically. And if you live in the Monona Cottage Grove area, you'll notice that the med flight has been riding a significant amount of time overhead. And part of that is they're transporting COVID patients from other areas into this community. Meritor, St. Mary's, and University have significant patients filling their beds right now. So, and the other interesting factors are we have in fact had some positive cases from teachers in our school district. And I also got a number from another school district where they're in person. And since they've been in person, September 8th, they have They have only had approximately 5 positive students. They have had 17 positive teachers. So as Dan may say, we're ready to go. And I'm not really sure that's the message I've gotten clearly before. We have to be ready to go safely. And I want to see a very clear plan for a positive case in writing, not just the reference to Dane County. So there's some really important pieces we need to make sure as a board we have together that makes us comfortable for a December 1 date. And I'm not seeing that put together as a board member. I'm not seeing that put together and in front of me yet. So I'm, again, supporting moving to the date and trying to make the transition more appropriate for students, as much as I support the need to go back.
Okay, Peter?
Well, I find it a little ironic to say, one, that board members shouldn't be reporting on the COVID response and then get a long response on the COVID cases. And we can all, I mean, Dan sent around the weekly report. However, that ends the date that's through October 12th, which was actually prior to the most recent peak. So that data is, I understand it's the most, there'll be a new report you'll get tomorrow. And I understand, but we should look at the current data up front. And like I said, Dane County is diverging. And it is interesting that we've had cases amongst teachers since school is not open. And part of the problem is that we have teachers in the community getting, community spread of COVID. I do want to state that there's been some pretty extensive research that does not see a higher incidence of COVID cases in teachers who are teaching kids up to 6 years old. And that's pretty good research. Anyway.
All right. Susan?
Could Dan give us an update on IHM just very quickly, just because we have a 4K program there? It's my understanding that they've put a message out today regarding being outside your COVID bubble during Thanksgiving or Christmas. Do you have that information?
From today, I do not.
Pardon me?
The message that they released today, I have not seen.
Okay, it's my understanding that they have sent a message out, and remember we have a 4K section at IHM. If you travel outside your COVID bubble during Thanksgiving or Christmas, or do any traveling, you keep your students home for virtual learning for 5 school days after contact with those people or after you get home. So again, I think that speaks to Susan and Lorraine's point and concern about the vacation breaks, starting before the vacation breaks. Again, we have a 4K program at this school.
Okay. So as president, Dan, you want to say something? Go ahead.
I'm sorry, just one quick clarifying remark. So I just wanted to be clear. As far as having protocols, schedules, all that thing, those things, we could have that ready to go December 1st. Okay, so that's why I want to be clear on that. As far as what is the largest concern, it is staffing. What we don't know is, will we have enough staff to fill those classrooms, or are we going to have staff that are either positive themselves or out on quarantine? That's the big unknown, and that's the challenge that all the school districts who have opened are dealing with. Susan mentioned IHM. They are a 4K community partner with us, so our students are attending virtually. However, they do have, in addition to their school, they have students there, in childcare settings as well. They did close their doors for 2 days last week, and that is pretty typical of all of the schools that are open, whether it be a section that needs to be quarantined, an entire class, or a building. So that's the big unknown, of course, is what is it going to look like December 1st as far as where we're at with number of cases in our community and our staff. So that is a concern of mine. But I do want to be clear, protocol-wise, procedures, scheduling, yes, we can have those done.
Okay. Eric and then Peter.
Two quick things. Just one for Dan. I just want to make sure that that administration is going to prioritize our staff who have pre-existing conditions or children or family members with pre-existing conditions. That's the case, right? That's going to be a priority.
Absolutely, yes.
And then the second thing I was going to say, I forgot. So I'm going to let everybody else go. I'll come back.
All right, Peter.
I was just going to ask Dan if he has a recommendation.
I think it's a fair question, and I would recommend that support Susan's motion and move to the January 25th date.
Thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and call for a vote at this time. Peter?
Procedurally, you need to wait till everybody's done talking. I mean, if nobody has anything else to say, that's fine.
Looks like everybody was muted. Anybody got anything else to say?
Okay.
Okay, then I would like to go ahead and call a vote. Because it has been first and second for opening for the January 25th. So go ahead, start roll call vote. Susan Manning,
Aye.
Susan Fox,
Aye.
Eric,
Nay.
Lorraine,
Aye.
Peter,
Nay.
Elizabeth,
Aye.
Andrew, aye. The ayes have it. Motion carries. I will be working closely with Dan and administration and the principals to make sure that the board members get everything that needs to get out. I will work with Katie to get all the communications out to the parents and the community. As we are in this unknown and we're just guesstimating, we're just gonna have and let Dan and the school do their job and do the best they can for the students and for the families in the community. So thank you, board members, for coming up with this. And so after that, one thing, so the board members, just to let you know that I'm working on trying to get a, we're going to have a board workshop. We haven't had one this year and we really need to have one so we can start learning more about board procedures and policies and all that good stuff. So, Peter?
Can we have a discussion as a board before you decide that we have a board workshop? So we can talk about the topics to be considered and when we want it and if we want to have them.
Yeah.
Would you
Susan?
clarify the topics? So just so the rest of the board is aware, I've specifically asked for us to have a special board meeting in the next 2 weeks. One of the items on the agenda is to discuss extracurriculars.
Okay.
Because I think we haven't really addressed that as an issue, and it came up too fast without all the information I think that the board was asking for that night. So, and I think the timing is really important.
Okay. Peter?
Future meetings aren't on the agenda tonight, I'm afraid. If we're going to have a discussion about future meetings in a workshop, then I think we need to appropriately
Yeah, we will.
listen, have
But
that.
I'm just letting you, I'm just putting it out there that that's going to be in the next regular board meeting in the future dates.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Okay. All right. So can I have a motion for adjournment, please?
I'm sorry, hang on.
Big topic.
We have still not heard the PHMDC data update or the staffing considerations or the updates to the 4K2 hybrid model as the agenda is on the agenda.
Not this agenda that I have up here. Well, let's
Well,
see here.
we still need to
We talk
discuss
about the opening.
the model for opening and I think those other items, yeah, it wasn't clear to me whether we were going to be discussing all those. I know Dan included in the documents a good explanation of staffing considerations, because we've had some questions about that. And so I don't know if you were going to address that, Dan, or if you just felt if people had questions. I mean, it runs through the Family First Coronavirus Response Act, for example. All that information is here. But it's here for us to read, and I don't know if there's anything to go over. I don't know if anybody had a question or not, but that's when I saw those bullet points too. I wasn't sure either. I know we still do have one more action thing that we have to take, I think, but I don't know.
If I could.
Yeah.
As far as the way, the rationale for why we posted the agenda that way, the public health data update, clearly, we just wanted to make sure that information was shared, whether or not there was discussion about it. I didn't know if board members had questions, but I just wanted to give you the latest information. It's all on their website as well. You all have access to it that way. So that's up to you if you have any questions or any discussion, but that was that first piece. The staffing considerations, there was a specific request if we could have information available about what type of leaves are available for teachers, and so on. So we did add information about those. Nicole, be prepared to answer any questions on any of those that you would like. We can go through that. And then third, the instructional model as well, that left that as an opportunity for whatever discussion the board might want to have regarding that.
Susan Fox.
I have two things. One, I'm wondering, this is a really nice summary for staff, and I'm thinking that would be a good thing to send out to staff as far as that part goes. As far as the model.
Susan, can you say what part? Because I don't think people can see.
Well, the
You're talking.
audience can't see it. It's in the document. You have to click on the reopening plan document, and then it says staffing considerations, and it runs through the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, the regular FMLA, the ADA, it runs through all of that, and it's pretty clear. And that's another maybe advantage, by the way, of the later date. The CARES Act, which I believe was the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, is not part of the CARES Act. Anyway, that only runs through December, so that stuff is available at least for that. Well, we're not doing it now, so I guess it doesn't matter, but that won't be a factor. Anyway, I think that would be good to communicate, but we do need to discuss the model as well. And just to give some structure to that, I would like to make another motion. I move approval of the AB hybrid model as presented for the 4K2 in-person option to be offered to families for the phased reopening.
I think a point of order, Susan. I thought we need to talk about staffing considerations, and I have some questions about those I'd like to ask.
Okay, sorry. Well, yeah, I mean, that can happen. I mean, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank
Go
you.
ahead.
Nicole, can you just talk a little bit about the, I'm curious the difference of the paid sick leave, the 2-week paid sick leave, the 2 weeks, 80 hours of sick leave, and the expanded family and medical leave. And my main concern is I'm concerned about staff that might be put in a situation that might be dangerous to themselves or families. So if you could just maybe highlight some of the options that would be available with those current leaves, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. So the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, if your concern is really if an employee has a family member who has a condition that makes getting COVID potentially life-threatening, the 2 weeks or the 10 weeks of leave is not going to assist them there. And honestly, FMLA probably is not going to either unless the person contracts COVID and is considered to have a serious health condition at that point, which the employee needs to then provide care. Likewise, the ADA is not going to provide any protection either because it'll be the employee's family member who has the health condition and it's not the employee who has a disability. So our best bet there is that when we are trying to staff, if we have people who are providing us with documentation from their family member's physician that that individual could be at high risk if they would be exposed to COVID, then we will have to give preference, or that we're going to try to give preference to those individuals so that they're able to remain at home and working so they're not bringing that exposure home. Right now, I don't know how this is going to play out with all of the employee requests that we're going to receive, and then how that's going to fit in with the requests from families. So I don't know how many teachers we're going to need to come into the classrooms and how many we're going to need to be in a virtual environment. So I can't guarantee at this moment that we're going to be able to honor every single person's request who might be in that sort of a situation.
But the procedure for staff would be to make that request and provide that documentation, and that will put them on a priority list to continue working online. Is that
That's correct. So at this time, we are planning on sending out a communication to all of our staff, letting them know that if they are going to be requesting that sort of an accommodation, that they should let us know. And then we're just keeping track of that. And then once we have reached our deadline, we can see who all those staff members are, and then we can start trying to piece that puzzle together. Of course, we want to honor people's requests the best we can so that we can keep our teachers and their families safe.
And you're going to provide this information, if you haven't already, to staff?
That's correct.
Thank you.
All right. Any other board member have any questions? No questions or anything? No more further discussions on anything?
Well, then I'd like to move to the next item.
All right, so
And I apologize for jumping in. The way it was agendized wasn't clear to me either. I thought it was a list of discussion points and I wasn't sure we were going to have
Right.
conversations, but I appreciate, Eric, that question because that was helpful. Then I would move approval of the AB hybrid model as presented for the 4K2 in-person option to be offered to families for the phased reopening.
Peter?
Since we're not opening until the end of January,
The motion would need a
But
second.
I need a second.
Yeah.
good point. Thank you.
I need a second.
Second.
Thank you, Lorraine. All right, Peter?
Since we're not opening now until the end of January, and we just talked about how we need a lot of time to consider things, I think it's probably premature to consider to put in stone the AB model as presented, since we've just given everybody more time to think about what the right thing to do, and there might be some changes that come into play here. So I don't see any reason to approve it at this moment.
Susan?
I guess, there's some merit to that. I think part of it though is if we keep putting off that decision as well, I think parents need a date and they need to know what the choice is.
Right.
Because they have to be able to, this is a hard thing for people to understand. I think there are I'm just guessing there are a lot of families out there who don't really understand this model. And I think there has to be a big effort put forth to communicating what this really is. We had, and the reason I recommended this one was because this was the administrative recommendation originally. And when I looked at the staff survey as well, more people total, if you took first choice and second choice, favored this model over the AM/PM, and fewer people chose this as their third choice. And just in talking to people about it, talking to other rationales about it, it made the most sense. But I think as far as so we can do that by then. I think the things that need to be communicated to families are the limitations of this model, of any of the hybrid models, not just this one, but that if they choose this model, they have to understand what it means when their kids go back to school. There will be furniture removed. Young children will be sitting at desks or tables or however they're going to do that. I mean, separated, there will be some restricted movement. Maybe they can still do story time circles on the rug if they, mark out the circles. I don't know. I don't know what the rules are going to be about that. That's for you all to figure out. But things like playing with blocks, doll houses, the kitchen center, whatever, they're not going to be able to do any of that because they can't be touching all this stuff. So it's a very different environment. It's not a classic school environment. I had just a short conversation with my daughter who's in a quasi-virtual, quasi-in-person thing right now in Chicago. And she felt like even though there's a lot of restrictions, some of the kids did appreciate being back. But there's that piece. They have to, and they do really have to understand the piece about the fact that their child, that that this whole decision means that their child might not have the same teacher, and that has to be explained. I think it would be helpful to make people feel better about that if they are aware that there'll be a planned transition with some activities. And I think it'd be great to be doing that through those whole January weeks prior to it. So, you know, knowing that we have these holidays coming in here, knowing how schools operate, this is not a ton of time to do this. So I think it is important to make this decision so people know what we're talking about. You know, and I think they need to have more information about what happens on those independent study days in this model. I'm kind of assuming that, I know teachers now are sharing some asynchronous videos, for example. So I'm kind of assuming that the kids who are, if they do the AB hybrid, if they're in school on Monday, for example, and they're home all day Tuesday, they'll get that morning check-in with their teacher, but then they're on their own all day. Well, I'm assuming there could be some shared and asynchronous stuff from a teacher who's still teaching virtually that maybe they could access. I'm not hearing that all schools are doing it that way, but it's important, I think, that we make that commitment to our staff that if they're teaching in person, they're not also responsible for videoing things and teaching virtually, because I just think that becomes an unwieldy workload. So I think there are a lot of reasons to make this decision now, because all of our staff sitting here at this meeting and all of our teachers are up to their eyeballs every day in work. And I know from parents are talking about getting notes from teachers at midnight, because it's hard, you know, and if you have, it's one thing to even grade a certain number of class papers or whatever, but if you have to watch a bunch of different videos, I mean, there's just a lot of time consuming stuff with this. And I'm hearing from staff that those Wednesdays that they're planning, those go by really fast. And they're not asking for more, but they're saying, boy, do they use them. So, okay, now we're going to do a different thing. There's a lot to think through. I just think we need time for everybody to get on board and understand how it's going to work, and parents to really understand what they're signing up for if they make this decision. So I would argue that we should make this decision now.
All right, Eric?
I agree we should make the decision now. I do not agree with the AB model. I find a lot of inequities with that model for the students going to in-person compared to the students who are learning online, with as far as amount of instruction that they would receive. I also, Susan, what you said about the staff preference was a little bit misleading, considering by far the majority of the teachers, their first choice was the AM/PM model by more than half. So that was by far the first choice of the majority of the teachers, was the AM/PM model. In fact, the AB model was the least preferred for their first option. It was their most preferred for the second option,
right,
but the most preferred. And I think, you know, and speaking as a teacher myself, that's the first thing that jumped out to me when I looked at the plan is that concern of the amount of time and consistency of instruction compared to the students that are receiving it online. And that does concern me when you have a group of online learners that are getting instruction 4 days a week on a consistent basis. And then we have a group of in-person learners who their instruction is going to be broken up into 2 days. I don't think that those asynchronous days are going to be that beneficial. I would like to see them receive the same amount of days of instruction as the students online, which is 4. So I really feel strongly about the AM/PM model and against the AB model, and that's my reasoning for it.
Okay. Elizabeth?
I would also like to have a discussion around the various models and kind of where we want to go versus not want to go. And I think the idea of not governing on this or making a decision on this feels very unacceptable to me. I feel like every time we are indecisive about a thing or put a decision off for a particular time, the burden that falls on then is our staff and our students and our families, on the emotional burden and the cognitive burden of uncertainty. And I just think that's fundamentally unfair. And we've spent a lot of time now in discussion around this topic. We have a date that we have agreed on. And I think now it's time for us to really talk about what that plan is, what it's going to look like, so that Dan and the admin on this call and all the teachers and all the families can start both mentally and emotionally preparing for that and actually preparing for doing that.
Okay. So we're going to go ahead and table this one to our next meeting.
Someone can make a motion to table it.
Actually, wait, yeah, well, can I just say something first? I guess we can do that. I'm just wondering if there's more comment. I mean, I guess part of my feeling is this also, to me, falls into the instructional realm where I'm not even sure it really should be a board decision. I know this board has already voiced the opinion that they should decide, but I feel like in a lot of districts, I know the administration simply makes that choice, and we, they sort of have asked what we think. But I'm inclined to defer to their judgment. My understanding from teachers I've talked to as well is that this was talked through very thoroughly at school. So before, I really don't want to adjourn without hearing. We have principals here tonight who could maybe talk about conversations they had with their staff. We also have a couple of board members I haven't heard from on this. So I personally would like to hear a little more about it first, even if we decide once again we're going to table it, which I would prefer not to do, but if we have to.
All right.
Anyway.
Let's go. All right, Elizabeth, then Susan Manning.
I 100% agree with you, Susan. I think that, and I'm fine deferring the decision to our education folks, experts, leaders that are on this call, and hearing from them in terms of what are the strengths and challenges, why this is a benefit, I think is really, really important, whether this is in our purview or not. And then we need to, like I said, make a decision around that.
Susan Manning.
I totally agree. We had, the principals are here right now, and I think this is a great opportunity to get their input on this model, and maybe with the further time, whether they would. So 2 questions. What's your support on the model? And 2, with the extended time frame, would you like to at least have a few weeks to consider other models? And I really want to hear, again, from the principals who are going to have these children, Connie, Danielle, Reed, Angie, that would be very, very helpful to me right now.
Okay. Let's give the floor to those, Lorraine, and then we're going to give the floor to the principals.
No, I just want to say that I'm also in agreement with Susan Fox and Elizabeth and Susan Manning. I think that we should defer to our administration and principal. And then also, I think that we have a short window of time and we really need to make a decision very quickly.
I would say we need to defer to our teachers much more than administration. I think they're much, much more important in this decision than administration. I think the teachers have the most important say in what model is going to work the best and how it's going to be delivered, way more than administration would have. So I want to hear from administration, but I really want to hear from teachers too. I think that's more important to me to know. I'm on the fence about, if we're going to make sure teachers' voices are heard about the instructional model, I'm okay in trusting into the administration to make that decision, provided that the teachers have a huge input on what that's going to be. So.
Okay, so I'm gonna give it to the principals, but let me say my little piece, because it doesn't matter which one we use. Something has to get out here. And if it doesn't work, we go to the next one. It's just that simple. I just want to keep this simplified so the community and the families will understand that we're going to work with one model, and if it doesn't work, we just go to the next one. So the administration who runs the school should make this decision, and I would like them to go ahead and speak on the floor, please.
Okay, so if I could begin. We presented on October 6th our decision on the model, which was the one presented, the AB hybrid model. Take you back to July 27th. That's when the board voted on starting first quarter virtual, that we would then monitor and then come back and evaluate what we're going to do for second quarter. So our entire planning from that point on was focused on beginning of second quarter, having a model prepared should we be ready to return to some in-person learning. And so that's why we presented on October 6th that here is the model, and then here are the logistics. We're now 2 weeks later, which is fine because it's really important. And I want you to know how I support that the board members absolutely should have every question answered and understand completely rationale, how was it determined, and so on. So I want to make it clear that I absolutely believe in that. You absolutely have the right to choose to vote on the model. You're not obligated by policy. By policy, this is clearly an administrative role in doing the daily schedules, but this is a unique situation. So I'm fine if you want to vote on that, but we do need a decision tonight because we really do need to move forward for the reasons that have already been stated. Parents need to know we're going to, even though we're now not looking until January, we're not going to wait till the last minute to pull this together. So we want to move on, forward. And our principals absolutely can answer any questions you have about the process, how teachers were involved in the process, and then, the rationale, for where we landed on this. And I'll just say this, as far as the big picture, I absolutely appreciate we're about instructing kids, okay? And so the instructional component, of course, is very important. But the other really key components, we talked about this a little bit at the previous meeting, there are other considerations outside of the instructional, and that really is what tipped the scales toward this model. Jared's with us tonight. I would like him to be able to speak a little bit about transportation, school nutrition. Those have huge impacts on the model that are chosen. And then the safety concerns. We talked about the idea that we now know that the physical, the touching and the cleaning perhaps is not as important as we thought it was back in summer, but it's still an important piece, and that plays into it as well. So if you don't mind, before we get into the instructional conversation, if I could let Jared speak for a few minutes on the transportation and school nutrition impact of this decision.
Yeah, so when we're currently, so just as a reminder, with school nutrition, we are providing over 11,500 meals every week that's delivered to houses using our busing system on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So if we did go to a model where there was an AM, PM, and we were only bringing back our 4K2 kids, we would have to eliminate that program because we would not have enough buses to be able to run midday when we do the deliveries. Then beyond that, with the number of students that potentially, and obviously these are hypothetical because we have not set out our enrollment numbers, but trying to run routes in the morning and then again midday with a 90-minute turnaround with the disinfectant of these buses and getting those buses to run again in the afternoon, and then taking those kids home with obviously having much reduced capacity on our buses when we talk about one student per seat per row, unless it's a family unit, loading the buses from the back to the front, trying not to cross over between schools as we do contact tracing. Those are major concerns. And obviously we can pull buses that we typically use for our middle school routes and our high school routes. But just as a reminder, when we are during a normal school year, those routes are actual double routes. So it's not like we have a single bus for every single route. For example, our high school routes drop off at the high school and then proceed to be Winnequa routes. Same thing in the afternoons. Our afternoon drop-off routes for our Taylor Perry and Cottage Grove School then become Glacial Drummond routes. So it's not like we have tons and tons of buses available to accommodate the number of different routes that we would need for transportation on an AM, PM. Then as we move into cleaning during the day, obviously we have 2 shifts that work for our buildings that are cleaning. We would have to pull the individuals that are working second shift and bring them into middle of the day, which then means that there would be a pretty quick turnaround that would have to happen in the evening, which then would require additional staffing that would need to be hired or even pulled from other buildings. So obviously there are a lot of other considerations on the operational side, but I think the big part of it is school nutrition. We are providing that pretty important school nutritional aspect, and we are able to continue to do that, obviously modifying it if we do go with the proposed instructional model as is. We would be able to move those instructional days, or the deliveries could still happen midday since the students would be going full days, or we could also move those to just Wednesdays. That would help with some of the meal deliveries if it can happen on either a Tuesday or a Thursday. But we do want to be able to continue to provide that transportation option for the school nutrition to provide the meals Because if we look back into the spring, and I understand it was unique back in the spring, but we were only serving about 500 meals in the spring, and those were free meals as well. And with the delivery, we're hearing from families that are actually, in grades 3 and above, that they do enjoy seeing that school bus come. It does bring back some normalcy, and especially if we're not able to bring back our grades 3 through 12, being able to continue to offer that option as well is important. But I think the bigger part of it is not being able to have that capacity in transportation, and and I've looked at the models of McFarland, I've looked at the models in Verona and Wanakee, and those school districts are also limiting who can even ride the bus. And that's something that I think is something we need to take into consideration. So if a family chooses perhaps an AM or a PM, they're also being told that they can't ride the bus. And that's not necessarily an equitable option for families. If a family needs to ride the bus or needs to go to school in the morning due to daycare issues, and we're telling them that if they choose the AM session, they're not going to get busing home, I think that presents a problem for our families that do want to send their students face to face. So those were some of the considerations when we talked about transportation specifically on just that 8 PM side of things.
Elizabeth?
Thanks, Jared, and thanks for the clarification around kind of like the sort of forced choice or non-choice aspects of like the busing piece, specifically around our nutrition services. Is there something unique or different about how we're doing nutrition services compared to some of the districts that do have that AM PM model? I'm just kind of curious what the difference is there.
Yeah, so the school districts that we looked at that have that AM PM, and what they're doing with school nutrition is most of them are not doing a delivery. They are requiring families to come to the schools to pick up their meals. Actually, Verona, for probably about 3 weeks of their AM PM, did not offer any type of school nutrition program at all, even for the families that were attending in person. In McFarland, they do require their students they do send home for the kids that are coming face to face that meal. So the child would come in the AM and they would get a meal that would be for lunch and breakfast the next day. And then the students that are in the afternoon would actually get a breakfast and lunch. So there's actually no eating that's happening at school. But that was a pretty easy system to continue moving forward with, because obviously we have access to that. But then we would require families to actually come to one of our school sites to pick up our school nutrition meals if they wanted to receive that free meal. And then that's similar to what's happening in those other schools that are offering the AM PM session.
Thank you, Jared.
Jared, just real quick, how many students are in the meal program, are receiving meals again? Just so I know the number that's being affected.
Yep. So we are actually we have over 400 families that participate. And with those 400 families, I don't know the exact number of students, but we're providing over 11,500 meals a week.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions for Jared? Okay. Dan?
Hey, so I think as far as the instructional model, I don't know if, I guess I'll ask the principals if there's anything you want to share based upon what you heard from questions from the board members. Otherwise, maybe if there's, very specific questions that could be answered. If you recall, we did give a presentation 2 weeks ago, a pretty good overview of that, but we certainly can, I don't want to make sure that we cover anything that board members have interest in. So it's okay, I'll just ask at this point, not to put you on the spot, but if any principals have anything that you think you'd like to contribute from what you've heard from board member questions.
Peter?
Well, I guess my comment would be it wasn't the first choice amongst the staff. It was, if you looked at the data, I think it was the choice that people objected to least, but it wasn't the first choice. And I'd ask for comments on choosing this over the other models presented.
Susan Fox.
You're on mute, Susan.
My internet is cutting out, so be patient with me.
It's all right. I got you, Andrew.
What I was saying is, I agree. I'd kind of like to hear a little bit about what the staff discussions were, because yeah, the AM PM was the first choice, And, but when I was looking through it, I thought, well, when you look at who picked the first choice and second choice, and you added up all the first and second choices, this one was by far the leader. And I thought as sort of a compromise, and knowing that that was what was being recommended, I just wondered if going back and talking with staff, if you have any thoughts on where people seem to be right now. I mean, the sense I've got is I've read through a bunch of the comments that people have made, and you know, there's no really good hybrid model, really. But this one has some benefits, and the fact that it could be phased in for older kids would be a benefit as well. Anyway, so I don't know if anybody does have anything that they wanted to share that came from staff discussions or.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So I guess two things. One is I feel like we got quite a bit of staff feedback on this. We had several listening sessions where we discussed the various models. We did this survey. So we did have very, very good conversation with the teachers about the models. I think you've all adequately expressed and very accurately that picking a model, there's no perfect model. Like, we all just want to be back in person, face to face all day, and that would be the most ideal. And so none of them are perfect. I think the big things that came out in our decision was the safety concerns for the AM PM spoke very strongly. So I think staff favored the instructional they liked the fact that they could see their kids every day, right? Like, that's what they would like the most, is being able to have that touch point with them every day. But the safety concerns of being able to adequately clean, especially for 4K through 2, where there's a lot of manipulatives, there's things in the classroom that kids will that we will want them to use, and cleaning all of that and having enough time to clean all of that in between the AM and PM. We talked about, like, okay, we could do all hands on deck and really thoroughly cleaning these rooms in between, but the sustainability of that for a long period of time was also a concern. So really, truly, it was a safety concern that drove the decision in my eyes. So I don't know if other principals agree, but that was kind of how I saw.
Yeah, Angie, I second that. And something that we did talk about as well, that is really important to our team, is ensuring that students receive high quality, rigorous instruction, right? And so with the AMPM model, what it does, it actually shortens the time that we would be able to, like, dig in and get that instruction done with high fidelity. And so in addition to talking to teachers, looking through surveys, and having multiple like groups. I know Reed and I, we met with second grade frequently. Connie and I felt like we talked every day with smaller groups, breaking down to special teachers and related arts, everyone. We had really deep, meaningful conversations. But in addition to that, we also talked to other district leaders in different districts who have either adopted the model or shared their perspective on what we could do better. And so we took all the information as a team. We just went through all that data. It really wasn't what we prefer, because I think we all are on the same page of what we all would prefer. It was what's best for our students, primarily, right? Because we want to make sure that they're getting their needs met and that we're meeting the high level of rigor that we're providing right now. We want to continue that. We don't want anything to happen where students start to not get their needs met. In addition to that, safety, like the safety of our students and our staff, that is really important. And so those are the driving factors, at least from my lens, that led to, yeah, it's ideal to see our kids every day and have these touch points 4 days a week, but is that really benefiting what we're trying to do, which is provide instruction?
Daniel, I got a quick question. Do you feel confident that you reached out to staff to make an effort to try to get their feedback based on those two things, the model and the safety concerns, and feel like that their voices have been heard?
Yeah, I will say this, Eric, and maybe because I'm just so new and I don't know, but I feel like the conversations we had, we listened. It was more or less teachers actually sharing their perspective and Reed and I writing everything down and then coming back and addressing it again. It was like a problem solving type of collaboration. And I will say, coming from different spaces, that this is the first time I've actually felt as an administrator or a person that is helping leading a building, more unity and partnership between teachers. It's not very much top down or I'm making decisions or this is your options. It's all of us talking about, this is the models we are looking at. This is the data we've collected. What are your thoughts about this? How can we better support you? What do you feel safe in? What do you feel will be more effective? And what are your needs to make sure we get this done? In fact, after this board meeting tomorrow morning, we're going to have a debriefing section with our second grade. I mean, this is something that we're constantly talking about. It isn't just we're shooting out a survey and getting data. We're physically having these meetings, having these conversations, and we really want to know what teachers are thinking and how we can better suit their needs. So yes, Eric, I think that it was a very much so a joint collaboration on that.
Thank you, Danielle. That's very helpful.
I just maybe want to add, I agree with everything that Danielle and Angie have had to say about kind of the safety piece of it and making sure that we are really having that as a priority. As a building where every grade will be back, 4K through first grade, that would be a lot of turnover between the sessions. And so I think that is a huge concern for our staff. We held a big listening session. Actually, Lisa Hype joined me, and we listened to all the comments and concerns that teachers had. The educational assistants, or clerical, anybody who wanted to participate was part of that. And so they could voice pros, cons of any of their thoughts and opinions, and definitely have followed up with, when I attend their co-planning meetings, on the Wednesdays, the concerns, thoughts, fears. I want to hear what's really going through their head related to any of the models, and just even coming back to school, because there are a lot of questions, especially with, last week, I believe in Dane County, the number rolling average was 147 in cases. It was somewhere high of all time 78 maybe cases of hospitalization. So, I mean, those statistics are concerning to people. And we heard today how, Dane County is looking at how they're going to be doing contact tracing right now. They are overwhelmed. And so I just think we have to take all of the considerations, and safety is a huge one in my part. We also know that in the AM/PM model, we are giving up a little of the science and social studies. We could incorporate that when they're with us throughout a longer day. So that is something too that, we want to offer the ELA, the math, and how can we also incorporate the social studies and science into their learning.
Thanks, Connie.
Well, this is great because I went first last time, and so I'll go last this time. And I won't echo what anybody said, but the conversations with teachers is important, and the conversations with community members. I was on the phone with a community member today, and like, that AB model is crazy. I don't know how you're going to do that. And we just both sat there for a second, and we went ahead and we reflected, there's just no hybrid model that is like last October when we were at every single kid at school and we were operating the way we want to operate. And we just kind of went through all the models, and there's just not one that is perfect. But when you take into consideration that what everyone just said here, the one last part of it I think we did discuss is what happens if we need to go back to a virtual. We offer that in person, we have to go back. The AB model sets up better for going back and forth to a virtual model because it's a full block schedule that during the course of the day versus a half day. And it gives us that opportunity to transition back. We get a daily update from our ASA, which is our administrative networking in our state. And every day there's schools that are closing part of their schools, one of their grade levels, a classroom. And so again, we can't play the what if game, but if we just pay attention to some of the data, there is a possibility when we go back to have this offering to face-to-face, that we'd have to transition back to a virtual model. And the AB or the AA, either one of those, provided the best opportunity to make that transition smoother versus the half AM and PM.
Okay. Thanks, Reed.
Andrew, is it okay if I just share something quick then?
Sure.
Thank you. I think that one way to help understand the process is, I so appreciate Eric's desire to have the teachers' input so strongly weighed, and definitely that was top on our list as well. But we also wanted to make sure that sort of that 360 perspective was taken, and what it takes to logistically implement any of the hybrids. Some of those involve things that teachers shouldn't worry about. Teachers are teaching, and so they might not understand how transportation plays in or how food service plays in. They might not understand how logistically Connie might have to juggle, 20 sections of teachers in her building and that type of movement. So definitely we weighed that heavily, but we also, as a team then had to bring in all those other aspects of the planning. And I think the principals just did a great job explaining those other nuances that go beyond just the straight up delivering instruction to students.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, thanks everybody. I really appreciate all of this. And I think, I know, Eric, I think your question is a good one around family engagement. And I think the one thing that's been pretty obvious to me kind of through all of this is that, you all are sitting here are very good, strong, effective leaders, and good, strong, effective leaders get engagement from their stakeholders, right? That's part of the game. And so I'm glad to hear about it in detail. Like I think Danielle, what you shared was really great. Kind of what everyone shared about that in detail is really great. And I think just validates that as a concept. I think, Reed, the comment that you make around that you brought up, and Dan, you alluded to this earlier, this idea of high probability of rolling closures is something that we really should emphasize because, and we've talked about it a lot, we've alluded to it, we make the word rolling closures probably shows up at least once or twice. You can probably put on like the board bingo card, right? But I think it's important from a parent perspective, right? When I think about my child and like, yes, he's going to be back in school in person and it's really great, but the probability that he's going to stay in that classroom the rest of the year from the minute that those doors open to the time the school year is closed is just really low. And I don't think that that's guesswork. I think you can look around the community and you can see the pockets of classrooms or grade levels that have shut down. And I think that disruption really matters. And so, and I think I've been pretty clear on this board that like, if we see a pathway to opening, we should take it. I'm very pro kind of being able to give choice in all of those pieces. But I think having a model with which buffers ourselves for the very real probability, high probability of rolling closure is really, really smart thing to do on our part so that then we're not bouncing around and shuffling in a really strange way. And then second to that, I was really appreciative to hear Jared. To me, a disruption in nutrition services is a non-starter. Like that to me is fundamental from an equity perspective. It's fundamental from like a safety perspective, right? From a food security perspective. And if we don't have the ability to deliver meals with the same comprehensive, high quality way that we've been doing it all year, then to me, I think that we can't pick a model, right, that doesn't allow for that. I think that to me just feels like a non-starter.
Susan Manning?
I also sincerely value and greatly appreciate the principal input on this issue. I think it helps to clarify the questions that we had, particularly about the virtual days. And again, it's a very, very difficult choice, and it's going to be a difficult choice for parents. But I think it's nice to hear that. And the other experience we've had is having families that are in person right now and having within 5 days of opening, having full closure and quarantine of all the students in that section, and having them particularly pulling other family members who might also have been exposed by the child that's being quarantined. You don't know that. And not being able to transition to the virtual. So having you explain to us that, again, I'm not wild about the virtual part of the model, but to have, as Elizabeth said, a pathway to get started and a pathway to work on in a safe way that you all feel, and you feel you've had input from your staff, make us feel safe, makes me feel so much better to hear you talk about that. Thank you so much.
Lorraine?
I feel really reassured that you all have included the teachers and you've gotten their feedback. And the fact that you are having dialogue and you're continuously talking about this makes me feel a little bit better about going towards this model. So I would definitely support it.
Eric?
I'll say that what Elizabeth said about the 400 students with the meals, that is concerning to me. Certainly. I don't know if I would support the ABAB model. I'm going to make up my mind when we vote, but I do want to request, and I know I've already talked to you about this, Dan, I would like to have to maybe schedule a workshop or at least maybe a listening session with the teachers in districts so that they can talk directly to the board and we might be able to ask them some questions. I think that's important. These are really unprecedented times. I think you cannot communicate enough with everybody. I think it's incredibly important to have as much feedback as possible, considering none of us have been here before. We don't know, there's no roadmap for this. So I think that's important. I know I spoke to you about that, but I just like to emphasize that we make an effort to try to do that soon before we reopen in January.
Do you mind if I respond to what Eric just said? So thank you, and I agree completely. And that's something, and please understand, board members, that I agree with. We are living this every day. I mean, and I think you know this, how hard the people that are here with you this evening, our teachers, I mean, it's 24/7. It's been that way since last spring, really. And I think for me, I'll just speak for myself, not everyone else, that it is good to have reminders that you all aren't part of those conversations every day. And so we do need to take these opportunities to talk through that. So I do appreciate that. And I agree. I mean, if it means more meetings and workshops, that is important. I would love for the board members to hear directly from our teachers, no doubt about it, and so this is, and I'll just one final comment. What Elizabeth made such an important point that picked up on what Reed said, that we probably need to emphasize more in our future conversations. Those rolling closures, they are going to happen. Okay, and most of you know that my wife has a similar position. She has spent the entire night on the phone with her nurse and principals quarantined children tonight. It's been that way every night. They've tried to be open. They're hanging on. They'll probably be closing permanently here, pretty soon. So, we hope that things are better by the time that we bring kids in. Maybe that won't be an issue. We sure as heck are going to be ready for it the best we can, though, when we do, have the kids in. So.
Thank you, Dan.
Peter?
Yeah, I just wanted to note how I do appreciate this issue that you're thinking about the possibility of closing again when the plan. I think that has to be paramount. The plan that works with temporary closures as we go forward. So I was happy to hear that your consideration of that. Thanks.
Right. So with the motion and second, we probably would need to.
Sorry, I have one more question. Dan, do you have a recommendation approving the AB plan tonight?
I do. Thank you for asking, Peter. I would ask for approval from the board for our ABAB hybrid model.
All right. So I will go ahead. We had a first and second, so we'll go ahead and do the roll call vote. Susan Manning.
Aye.
Susan Fox.
Aye.
Lorraine.
Aye.
Peter.
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
Elizabeth,
Aye.
Andrew, aye. Ayes have it, motion carries. All right, was there any more further discussions on anything else here? Because
Oh.
all right, I'd like to hear.
Andrew, could I just,
Yeah.
just 2 minutes? I just want to say that, again, having the administrators here and present and being able to provide their input and their work with the teachers to give us the confidence that that has occurred, to me, really was a major factor in my comfort level with this decision. I'm out on the street polling 15 little kids trying to rake their yards and their families. This was so incredibly helpful. And I so appreciate your input and the fact that you've worked with your teachers and your whole building staff to bring us this information. It means a lot to me.
I just wanted to know that because I didn't have additional questions, but I thought all the information you brought was really helpful because I've read through all the teachers' comments and been thinking about this myself and trying to get my head around it. And it just was helpful to hear all of the thinking that went into this and all the discussions you've had. And yeah, and there were some, I guess I'm more clear on all the transportation issues than I was before as well. So it's just helpful to get a good picture of why this is the most, perhaps the best choice among imperfect choices for us at this point is how I guess I'd put it. So thank you. And thank you all for being here again.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, I wanted to ditto all that and also say, if any of you that are like kind of watching on the public or for our administrative team that's here, if you're having a thought about like, oh, I think we may have said that to you already, or, didn't we talk about this already? I think it's worth us all being reminded that like, given this time and given this stress, right, the information can only come in at kernels at a time, right? And then you hear it again and you digest it and you hear it again. And so I agree and echo that idea. That just really nice to hear. And I know we've heard a lot of this before, but again, so that we can kind of digest it and process it at a deeper level so we can come to a really good, clear conclusion for you and for the staff and for the families. And then my only other question is for Dan in terms of like, what is the next step now?
Oh, great question. So we'll get a quick communication out probably tonight yet, just short, about the board action tonight and let our families know that more details will come very soon. And I would say that would be, by next week. And also to staff. Some of the things we talked about as far as moving forward, Nicole had a chance to talk a little bit about some of the leave things. That her message to the staff is in draft form, ready to go out very soon as well. So as we have those communications, we'll keep you in the loop on those. And I think I'll try to put together a timeline for you as well about all the key steps along the way. And like I said, I think working backwards, we want everything finalized, I think, before the winter break for that January 5th piece. So
I think that's appropriate. That's helpful. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Any more discussion? All
So,
right.
Next Wednesday, right? Okay. Sorry, I know it's on the agenda, but okay. Now you can go. You want a motion to adjourn? Move to adjourn.
I'll second.
All right. Roll call vote. Susan? Manny? Sorry.
She's
Okay. Yeah.
Aye.
Susan Fox?
Aye.
Lorraine?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
Elizabeth?
Aye.
Andrew? Aye. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Good night, everybody. Thank you for